And joining us now to talk about the SARS employer filing season is Madelein van der Walt, who is Development Manager at Sage, Pastel, Payroll and HR. Morning to you, Madelein. You're not speaking for SARS here, but you're exposed to it in the way of your business. It's the employer season. There's employees, individuals who have to file, and now this is people who employ other people who have to file. How do we have to think about this? Set out the landscape for us.
Well, David, firstly, employers must understand that if they register to deduct employees' tax, they must submit these reconciliations once a year. Mm-hmm. So the filing season opened on the 1st of April 2014, and employers need to generate employee tax certificates firstly, and then reconcile the deductions they've made through the year. Mm. They need to keep track of the pay-as-you-earn, UIF and STL deductions they've made, and that needs to be submitted to SARS before the deadline of 31 May. Mm-hmm. Now, the employers need to keep in mind that they have to issue tax certificates to each individual employee. Mm. And there's many rules that you need to keep track of. You need to have each employee's individual personal information, contact details, as well as banking details. Then you need to reconcile the financial data for the year, all the remuneration, deductions, and contributions you've made on behalf of that employee. That needs to be submitted to SARS, and SARS will then vet and check that everything is correct and then accept your submission. So
I suppose they've got two ways of looking at this. There's the individual who submits his tax mm-hmm. or her tax return, and then there's the company one. So they look at the two and they obviously check if they match. Are there computerized ways of doing this? So it doesn't have to, someone doesn't have to sit and look at the two certificates.
Definitely. SARS embarked on a modernization of the pay-as-you-earn process in about 2008. And they've actually developed great tools for us to use. The first solution is the SARS e-filing website. Mm. If you haven't got an e-filing account yet, I would suggest you get one today. Mm. That is a very handy tool because you can do business with SARS outside of office hours. Mm. You're able to log in online 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, submit VAT, EMP 201, as well as your annual reconciliations.
Now, when you say that's what can be done, mm-hmm. the implication is that a lot of people haven't done it yet, or a lot of employers haven't. Why not, if it's so easy?
Well, I'm not sure whether employers understand how easy it is. I think they see the online environment as daunting. Mm. But for that reason, SARS has also developed a desktop application. It's called SARS Easy File for the employer. Mm. And they release new updates annually to comply with the new rules and regulations they've got for each filing season. Now, this application can be downloaded for free from the e-filing website. If you install the application, it's secure on your desktop, and there you can capture your data offline, your tax certificates, as well as your EMP 501 reconciliation, and then you connect to the e-filing website, and then you can submit online. So you don't have to be online all the time, so you don't waste any bandwidth. It's not an additional cost. You can do most of the recons on your desktop in an offline state.
It sounds like if you do that, and you've got the right software, you can spend a lot less time worrying about these things.
That's right. You can spend even less time because even if you've got the e-filing account and the EasyFile desktop application, you still need to capture the whole year's information on the offline application. But if you've got automated payroll software that does your pay-as-you-earn calculations for you, does the automated UIF calcs, all of this information is then combined at the end of the year into an electronic file that you can export from your payroll software and simply import into the desktop EasyFile software.
So what are the problems? You say people are hesitant or intimidated by the online. It's difficult to believe in this day and age after you've had, it's 20 years of some of these technologies and everyone now has gadgets and so on. Difficult to believe that companies are still intimidated. Why is that?
I think it's because of issues with bandwidth in the country, it's perhaps security, because it's payroll information. Okay. So you don't trust the information to be online. It's expensive. Internet in South Africa is expensive. So people think that it's expensive to go that route, and they also think that it's not secure. But because the payroll application and the SARS desktop application sits on your local machine, your data is secure, and you only submit the data once your submission is final, and you only submit those documents at the end. You're not online, you're not using bandwidth all the time.
What about if there are issues? And one hears horror stories about SARS taking the tax And if you want to ask questions, they'll say, yeah, we'll talk about it, but meanwhile, we're keeping what we've taken from you. So you make it sound simple, but what if there are issues? What if there are disputes, complications where queries have to be made? Then the online environment, maybe you actually just want to sit down with an individual human being as opposed to relying on the technology.
You still have the option of contacting the SARS call center, but again, the software that SARS provides us gives us a user-friendly interface where we can submit queries, we can track the status of a query. The e-filing website is actually wonderful in tracking disputes, submitting your complaints and getting feedback. You know exactly where the complaint is at every stage.
If companies do not submit as required, you said the season starts 1st of April through to end of May. Now, one thinks of the big corporates, they've got departments that do this, but a lot of small companies, 1 or 2 man or woman shows, haven't got time, rushing around, missed the deadline, maybe they employ 2 or 3 people, but they've still got to submit.
They have to, and it's difficult for them because it's difficult to maintain the employee records and make sure that when you get to filing season that your records are up to date and you've got all the mandatory information like individual income tax reference numbers. Recently SARS required all employees to register for tax and they've asked employees to include that reference number on the employee tax certificate.
You mean that's even if you don't earn enough to be taxed, you still have to register?
That's right, you still have to register. And if that number is not on a tax certificate, SARS will accept the admission as incomplete and they will raise penalties. So employers must make sure that they've got that information way in advance of the filing season. And it's difficult to get it, especially if an employee has left your employment. So make sure that you keep your records up to date. You get online tools for that, like an employee self-service tool where you give access to your employees to maintain their records themselves. If you don't have an online-based solution, you may want to put in a process where you update data once a year, where you give your employees a printed record and you ask them to then update their records. The second issue is maintaining knowledge. Every year, SARS changes the rules and regulations for calculating employees' tax. And we see that happen normally around budget time, when the Minister of Finance announces the annual budget. Employers must go and check out the National Treasury website as well as the SARS website. There's lots of guides and information in a plain, simple language that explains how to apply the new rules when calculating employees' tax. An example, if I may, is the change of the treatment of medical aid tax contributions for employees older than 65. Last year, it was allowed as a tax deduction, but from March this year, the tax credit system is applied for their medical aid contributions.
So if you get that wrong, then everything on the form is wrong and you've got to start again.
That's the problem. If you don't apply the new rules from the 1st of March, when you get to filing season, everything you've calculated will be wrong. So you need to go and do amendments, make corrections, and it's a process that you need to follow.
Fantastic. That's a lot of detail in a relatively short time. You can't say you haven't been warned. That was Madelein van der Walt, Development Manager at Sage, Pastel, Payroll and HR.